Welcome to the Matt Phillips Podcast. I am Matt Phillips, your sales leadership coach, mental toughness expert, and founder of Matt Phillips Coaching. We help sales managers and leaders make more money, save time, and become kick-ass leaders of their sales teams. And that's what we're here to talk about on this podcast. We are here to give you the tools and tactics to build a well-oiled sales machine and teach you the mental toughness skills so you can show up confident, focused, emotionally in control, and ready to energize your team. It's time to talk sales leadership and mental toughness. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to today's episode. It is Matt Phillips. So excited to bring you a very special guest, a person that I've had to wanted to have on the podcast for quite some time now, and have gotten to know her over the past couple of years. And I want to, and I'm so happy to introduce you to Shannon Alfonso. Shannon is president and CEO of Marsh McLennan Agency in Florida. She oversees 8 offices, 350 regional colleagues. And for those of you not familiar with Marsh McLennan Agency, they offer exceptional employee benefits and risk management solutions. So those of you out there who need benefits, business insurance, and private client service help, MMA is the place to go. So that's my little sales pitch for MMA. But Shannon has a fascinating background. I'm so excited to dive into her story, her journey, which has led her to this point in her career. But a little bit about her. She has over 30 years experience in the insurance industry. She is on the executive leadership committee for the broader Marsh McLennan Agency. She is heavily involved in the United Way. She is an individual, as you're going to find out, who has a huge heart for her people, for her organization, and for the clients that she works with, and is a woman that, again, over the last number of years, I've gotten to know her a little bit about her story, how she kind of grew up in the industry and how she's transitioned to this point. And we're going to spend time talking about that transition. But one of the other key things about Shannon that you need to understand is that she is a very powerful female who has grown up in this, just being honest, a male-dominated industry. And she was the first CEO of a region for Marsh McLennan Agencies. She is still the only female CEO for MMA that happens to sit in Florida. And so excited to introduce you to her today on the podcast. So without further ado, I'm so happy to welcome Shannon to the podcast. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here. I'm glowing from that introduction. So thank you for all of that.
Well, deserved. And, I can't wait to dive into, leadership with you and sales. And you just have such a unique journey in this industry. And just, again, getting to know you, you just have a huge heart. And I'm not joking when I say that. Like I know you come from Tennessee. I think there's something about kind of the Tennessee vibe within you that you care so much about different people. And we need to get out there and share your story here today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm always thrilled to have the opportunity to share. And I think you're right. I was born and raised in Tennessee, and grew up in a family where I didn't really have the experience of parents who went to college. My dad's a blue collar worker, and I just grew up in a small town. All that sweetness that brings is in my journey, and something I think that when I look back is a big part of who I am today. So excited to share more about that.
Absolutely. Well, I want to kick us off with one question and then dive in kind of the different stages of your career and life. But I always like to ask at the beginning of these, what is the best leadership advice you've ever received, and how do you use it today?
So I had an opportunity to sit with the CEO at the time for Marsh McLennan Companies. So that is the parent company of Marsh McLennan Agency, where I work today. And this gentleman, his name is Dan Glazer, has just achieved tremendous things, right? And is one of these people that when you sit with them, you're just a little nervous going in the room because he's a big deal. But he couldn't have been more real and we ask him that question, because you always ask people that, right? You want to hear what they've learned. And so he wasn't surprised by the question, but his answer really surprised me. I thought he was going to give this really complex thing that he learned, right? But it was so simple and it resonated with me. And I've used it myself, and I use it even with others that I work with when I see the opportunity. And it's about working with other people. And we live in a really difficult talent time right now. And so this was way before this time when I learned this. But he said, when you think about working with people and you have a team, and you're one of those people who just feels like maybe it's not always perfect, right? Or it's not the way you would do things, learn to let that go and know that the people that you might have dismissed pretty quickly in the past are really doing the best they can. They truly want to help you. They have good intentions to do their best and bring their best self, but maybe they just don't have the skill, the resources, the tools. And with a little more patience and a little more guiding to support them, you can probably help develop someone to come along versus in my day getting so impatient with, okay, this is just not the right person, right? And moving on and starting over with, people a lot of times. So I think about that a lot because, when somebody makes a mistake, I want them to feel comfortable saying they made a mistake. And I mostly want to be able to say to them, okay, let's talk about what we learned from the mistake so I can help them grow and develop as individuals, which frankly and selfishly helps me, right? If they come along too, and we're able to find that journey to get better aligned on something that might not have been clicking.
Love that. Well, we've talked about that before too, in kind of group settings individually, right? I talk a lot about that in a lot of situations, the first question is, okay, do you believe that person has malintent towards you, right? Or is trying to intentionally ruin the situation or make your life harder, and most of the time, I don't think so. At least 99% of cases. I know there are cases, absolutely.
Sure.
But have you found that same thing where most of the time we're talking skill set resource gap, not malintent?
And sometimes it's even my fault, right? It's even, did I set a clear expectation? It's almost like, with a husband and wife relationship where your husband says, I can't read your mind. If you think about that with your team and your colleagues as well, and you're like, well, did I do a good job of laying out the expectations and asking them, did they understand? What questions did they have? Do they have the resources that they need? Or how can I help them maybe, get some of those things in a clearer way or just better set those expectations? So it can be a lot of different things, but I think just learning to take a pause and really think through what the status is and what might be a better solution than just like, this is not working.
Very true. Well, so where you are a patient person overall, I've seen you get impatient at certain times. I get impatient at certain times. I think everyone does.
Sure.
Where does that, because what you're talking about is you're talking about like a framework, a way of thinking that you think through, a situation happens, and then you quickly get to like, okay, let's dive into that situation. And as best that we all can, like, how do we set the emotions to the side or at least compartmentalize for a moment while we analyze? How do you approach that? Because that to me is like a really unique skill set and challenging skill set that everyday life, just how do you separate and get to that place? So how have you done that? How have you developed that over time?
That's a really good question. And I think for me, in my development as a professional, as a leader, working on my emotions and emotional strength, just emotional awareness is one of the things that I think made the biggest difference in my leadership. Okay. And for me, that framework looks something like this, right? So let's say there's an incident, right? And I'm impatient all of a sudden or angry or whatever, right? So I do take a pause and sit back and say, all right, so what am I thinking, right? What is it that I'm feeling, right? So what I'm feeling, a lot of times I can dissect that and say, okay, that feeling is frustration, impatience, whatever, anger. But what are the facts here? And how did I get here? Right. And I really have to go back and focus on separating what I know to be truth or what I might be speculating or just wrapping up in emotion in making some bad assumptions, right? Or really not being patient in that moment. And so I really do go, okay, wait a minute. This is the part I know. This is the part I don't. So let me work with the part I know. And what can I do from here with what I know is a fact here? And this other, person in the situation, make sure we are both in agreement about what the facts are. And then, okay, so how are we going to get from A to B now? Right. And just set the emotions aside. Because I don't want to say you can't be emotional. I don't think that's real. We're human.
Agreed.
You need that time to be emotional. You need that space. You need that I guess just that ability to be vulnerable at the right time in the right place, right? But I tend to want to be productive, and I know that emotions can get in the way of that. So I may, get to that point, getting through it, and then honestly, when you come back and then you want to deal with your emotions, you're in a much better state of mind, so you can really help work through that a little bit better. But separating in that moment for me and being able to stop myself from just going full force on something really helps me, I think, deal with those types of opportunities.
I think that's huge. And I love that point on what's controllable and what's not based on the facts that we know. And then ask the clarifying questions, right? Well, I don't know this, so what is true?
Right.
But have the boldness to ask the question.
Right.
One area that I see leaders struggle a lot is asking those clarifying questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you see this as well, where when you talk about your process, like, okay, I know I'm with the feeling, right? I get to that point. I can analyze by myself what the facts are, but then I see a lot of hesitation from going out and having the conversation with people to figure out what is true or fill in the gaps of the unknown. And a lot of times I think it's like that fear or something's holding us back from having that conversation. How have you experienced that in the past? What do you see within like yourself personally or people you work with? Like what's getting in their way? And I just think that's a key skill to be able to move through that, because they're scary.
Well, it is,
like
and it can come across
but
as being accusatory or putting someone on the defense, right? So I think you have to be aware of that. Yeah, I always try to put myself in their shoes, right? Why is so and so feeling this way, right? And there's probably something going on in their head that I don't know about, right? That maybe has nothing to do with what we're working on, but it's affecting them. And I think just coming at it from the approach that, first of all, you come at it with respect and you come at it from this place of caring about the relationship, right? I respect you. I care about you as a person, right? And I want us to be able to work together, in a way that, we both feel good about this and achieve success, right? So you don't necessarily say that coming into it. You build that through building relationships so that you trust each other to be able to have vulnerable conversations and things like that. But, in the beginning it was, why would you say that? That's stupid. But, that doesn't make any sense, right? When you do that, you're going to trigger that other person on the other side, right? To immediately go into defense mode. And so how you show up will really, really make an impact on how they show up. And I think that I really think about that a lot. I think about how I respond and how I would feel with someone coming to me, or how I would want that, right? Kind of do unto others, right? That whole golden rule thing. But you have to be smart with your emotions to be able to do that, because a lot of people, even myself growing up, right, you just quickly go into firing mode. that takes some discipline and some practice to be able to get over that.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah, I think that's to be able to pause and think through, okay, I'm about to ask this, say this, do this. How's it going to be received? Not that it has to come off. I mean, sometimes you have to say the tough thing. But sometimes you can preface it a certain way where it's like, this is for the best interest of you. We're just trying to figure out what's going on, what the facts are. And then it's almost like walking through the methodology. Well, I was
You
feeling this way,
also have
but I
to
want to get to the
ask,
facts.
sometimes it depends, you'll get, depending on the people you're working with, right? And some people I worked with longer than others. And sometimes you have to even ask them, are you open to some feedback, right? Are you open to me taking some time to give you perspective, right? Because if they're in that really high state of emotion and no matter what you say, they're going to trigger, you don't want to do that, right? You just don't want to go there. You want them to be willing to say, you know what, I'm not quite there yet. Give me a minute, or let me take some time tonight. And let's come back together and talk about it. I'm always for that, right? Let's do it on terms that we can mutually agree will be productive for both of us. So that comes with, again, time and discipline as a leader, learning your people and learning how to work with them. Because you work with one person, on your team, that's one person's personality and their their style and how they react to things is so different from the next person, right? So over time, you just learn with each person how they show up and how when you show up, you can show up your best together. But I've gotten it wrong before. I've certainly gotten it wrong, and certainly had times where I had a bad message to deliver or a tough message to deliver. And I would say in those situations, and I know it didn't go well, and I'm upset with myself or with whatever. I always come back around to it. I don't let it lie, and I do something that you're familiar with my team. We do something called a clearing. And I make sure to take the time to really go back through what happened, what transpired, what was the situation, and really take that opportunity to clear the air. Because if we don't do that, it creates just this animosity and things can build up and really tear down a lot of trust and relationship that you've built. And in my opinion, is what's the secret to a high performing team, right? Being able to show up and be vulnerable and trust each other and work through challenges and, tough stuff just as much as the fun stuff. That's what makes us really, really click as a team and just get better. And it sets a great example for the people throughout the organization that watch this, right, and see how their executive team works through things and how people show up. And if every day were sunshine and roses, it would be like watching a afternoon CBS school special, right?
Yes.
That's not real world, right? Real world is we have ups and we have downs, and how we show up for that and work through that, I think, is what makes us successful.
It's very true. Well, for those of you, you can Google clearing and go look at that methodology. And, the way I describe it is it's, from a two-party conversation with heavy dose of listening and understanding. And so it's, presenting the facts, things like that, how you felt about it. And then it's kind of this back and forth of like, well, I heard you say this. So it's just this clarity of what that other person thought, felt, and then how do we ultimately kind of resolve and kind of move forward through it. So you can definitely Google that. One thing that comes up, Shannon, and I want to dive into your story a little bit of how you got into this industry in the first place, but like having those conversations, like clearing something or having a conversation with someone, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of confidence, as I always talk about. And you are a confident, courageous person. But I want to dive into like where that comes from a little bit. So you mentioned it at the beginning of this, but kind of your upbringing, you were the first to go to college out of your family. Talk me through like, how did you get to college? How did you get to tell me a little of that story, that path to like starting out in the insurance industry?
Yeah. Okay. Sure. And I don't think about it a lot of times, like how that built me up. Cause I will say I'm definitely with most of the rest of the world. I don't like conflict, right? Most of us don't like conflict, but
Yes.
in my life journey, just I have come through, what I described earlier, growing up in a small town and really just felt a little bit sheltered now when I look back, right? It took me 28 years to get technically out of the small town, right? And that's when I moved to Florida. But
Yes.
come from a family with a very just dedicated work ethic. It was about providing and doing whatever it takes, right? So I watched that, and I watched, my father and my mother both work at times, and there were things that we went through as a family um, to have to provide, right? It didn't come easy, and so I saw that, and I saw the things I wanted, right? Learning just what it costs to have a telephone at some point, right, and how you paid for that was a
Yes.
huge lesson for me growing up. Right? Oh, you want your own telephone line? Okay, you pay for it. Kids don't
Mm.
even know what that means now. They just want a cell phone, right? But
Hmm.
those responsibilities, right, really meant a lot to me. Now I didn't like it at the time, right? Because I thought my parents should do everything for me.
Yes.
But I learned from that aspect of growing up, learning the value of a dollar, learning what debt meant, learning,
Mm.
you got to do whatever it takes, and that you can just want everything, but you may not be able to afford it. So going to college for me was a choice I made, and I didn't get it right the first time. Right out of college, right out of high school, I went to college, and my dad was helping me pay for college at that time. And that was a stretch. It was a stretch for him to do. And so after a semester, I
Mm.
said, I don't want to be in college. I was 18 and small town, didn't want to continue that journey, right? Just thought, I'm gonna work at a bank and I don't need to do this, right? He said, all right, fine,
Mm.
you come out. If you want to go back, you pay for it. It's okay, whatever. I'm not gonna go
Mm.
back, right?
Right.
Later in life, about 3 years later, actually, I learned working at the bank, another male dominating industry,
Hmm.
that I had really gone as far as I could go without having a degree. I really
Mm.
was not going to be considered for leadership, management positions, things like that. So I decided to go back to college. And to do that, had to pay for college. So I ended up putting myself through college, working 3 jobs to do that, going into debt, all those things, right? Just to get a degree, not really knowing what that meant. And
Yes.
fast forward, technically graduated from college when I was 25, and probably paid for college by the time I was 35. It took me a while
Right. Yeah.
to
I've had
pay
that
for all of
experience.
that.
Took
Yeah.
me time too.
But when you pay for it, right, there is a little bit of a different meaning there. So in that
Yes.
journey, I started working in the industry by accident. Right out of college, I was hired by an insurance carrier. I had no idea what I was getting into. I was an accounting major, and just fell into it totally by accident. But my mind has always been one of, I like to try new things, and if I
Mm.
don't like bored monotony, right? So after every 3 or 4 years, some new opportunity would come at me, and I just kind of would take it, right? So I was able to
Mm.
experience a lot of different sides of the industry, starting on the insurance carrier side. Um, and every time those opportunities would come, I wouldn't be sure of myself. I didn't know.
Mm.
I didn't know if I could do it. But what I learned after doing that was like, neither does the other person know they can do it, right? It's just,
I like
if
that.
you get in there and you know yourself, you know your passion for, just when I'm in, I'm in. And when I commit, I
Mm.
commit. So I just would dive right in. And so after doing that a few times, I became more confident that whatever a role, is, if others are believing in me that I can do it, then I surely should be
Mm.
believing in myself, right? I was seeing that more than believing in myself. So I just, took that on and decided that every time those challenges came, it was actually fun and exciting for me. And it's so
Mm.
much I would take away, right, that would help me for that next journey that would come to be. Now, that was a lot of different paths, right? Underwriting, service, sales, leadership,
Yes.
and then ultimately into the role I'm in today as CEO. So all of those pieces of that
That's
journey, I would say, added to my maturity and my growth with the process to know what I control and how I can really take those
yes.
things on and not be so scared.
Yes. Well, so we go back to college for a minute, right? So you're working for 3 years, you decide you're going back. A lot of people wouldn't do that, right? Or they'd settle or say, well, the next thing's not worth it. But obviously that college experience was well worth it because you worked 3 jobs and did it. Why? Why was it so important to you?
I didn't like struggle for money. I didn't like paycheck to paycheck. I decided as I was getting older that I probably was going to get out of the small town. I wanted to explore new things. All of that had a price tag to it, right?
Mm.
I just knew that I wasn't going to be satisfied just with, or content, I should say, with where I was. There was more, and I was itching for it. And so the only way I could control it, right, was get the
Mm.
education. And I was underestimating at the time the education of paying for the education and getting the classes and the diploma and all of that was one thing. But the education of all the other things around it was just as beneficial, right? To learn how to survive on my own. Moving from small town in Tennessee, jumping to South Florida when I knew no one here
Mm.
except a few people from work. I got on an airplane with
Mm.
2 suitcases, and that was scary as heck. But it was the best thing. I mean, when I look back, I think that to me was such a leap of faith in myself that,
Mm.
hey, you know what? I made that work. I can pretty much figure anything out. And
Yes.
that lesson was just as valuable to me as the college degree.
Right. Well, I think you're bang on. It's that whole concept of, are we all of us willing to bet on ourselves? And do we rely upon the success from the past, no matter how small, to build the confidence to go do the next thing and
Yeah.
remember those? Because I agree, it's you make those jumps and shifts, and I've done it in my career. I've done it, starting a business and shifting and morphing a business and doing all sorts of stuff. And every time I'm same as you, I have that scary feeling, but I have to rely on like what have I done in the past, no matter how small that is, somewhat similar or not at all. That's what I'm going to leverage to go take that next step,
Hmm.
even if I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I describe myself as a survivor, right? And that has a lot of different meanings
Mm.
for me. I've had health scares in the past, and I'm a survivor in that respect, right? I'm
Mm.
a very proud cancer survivor. And then I'm a survivor of, figuring out how to get myself from point A to point B, right? And
Yes.
move away to a town I didn't know. I mean, I didn't even know the directions down here, like where where to go to the grocery store. I mean, that just put something inside of me that was like, whatever it is, I'll figure it out, right? My husband and I have that conversation a lot today where I'm like, I'm just a survivor mindset. Like whatever comes, comes. I like to be prepared. Don't get me wrong. I'm a planner and I like to be prepared. But I also know that as soon as something seems like it's not working or it's broken, my wheels are already turning, right? What am I going to do to change
Mm.
the situation? Ultimately to
Yes.
survive it or fix it or whatever it is. And I mean, there's times where I can't, right? I hate to say that out loud. Can't fix everything, but more often than not, if there is a way, I can figure it out. And I'm willing to make sacrifices to do
Yes. Yes. Well, history has proven you're willing to do that.
that.
So that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, so tell me a little bit about, because how long were you in a sales role until the CEO role?
Uh, wow. Let's see. So that was probably, I don't even remember for sure, but it was kind of, there was a blurred line there for a little while. It was
Yeah.
probably about 8 years in total
Okay.
where I was kind of a service and a sales um, contributor, I would say, individual contributor, in addition to being
Yes.
in some of the roles at the time. So by accident, again, like just because I would have never thought I was going to be a salesperson. I would have never said that if you asked me. That was not my mindset, right? Was not to be a salesperson. I'm more of the service mindset, right? So, but then when
Yes.
I learned how to take the service mindset and use it to sell, then I was like, oh, this is pretty rewarding, right? So for about 8 years, I did some of that on my own, and I did some team selling. So I worked with other colleagues, peers, and we would go out and do team selling together.
Love that. Well, so a lot of salespeople listen to this podcast, right? So,
Okay.
and sales leaders and others. And so I love talking about this topic as well, because I think with anything, sales isn't for the faint of heart, if you will, right? And can
For
definitely poses
sure.
its challenges and all that sort of stuff. How did you kind of separate yourself from others and continue to improve and get better and learn the craft? Because if you weren't good, you wouldn't have received the opportunity to become CEO, of course. But what were, I guess, some of the biggest challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them to continue just to improve as that salesperson?
So for me, I think it was about the realization that I am not the typical lone wolf salesperson. We have some of those, right? And they go out and they're very good
Yes.
at building relationships and bringing in clients and centers of influence and things like that, right? And they just have sales DNA, right? I say they could sell
Mm-hmm.
ice to Eskimos, right? They just have that.
Yes.
I
Yes.
did not have that. I'm more of an introvert, if truth be told, and was just thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
okay, how am I going to make this work? But I go back to the team selling, and what I realized was every salesperson had a different approach, a different style, a different strength. And I gravitated towards the ones that complemented me and I could complement them. So team and a team environment has always defined me and how I like to work. And so
Yes.
in the sales side of that, I just took that to say, you know what, rather than try to be a top salesperson and reach this goal by myself, I bet I could do it faster if I teamed up with some other people. And that, for me, I also saw how it insulated and protected the relationships, because 9 times out of 10 within an organization that we're working with, the team that we're working with on the other side has somebody that I connect with really well and somebody the other guy connects with really well, right? And so taking that
Yes.
in total just better prepared us to be more proactive and create that synergy with them. It also protected us if somebody left some side of the organization, to have more than just one-to-one relationship there. And once I realized that that's how I like to do it, and I had several peers at the time that were willing to do that with me, I started to enjoy the aspect of sales, and it felt really good to go out and be able to hunt that new business and feel like I truly did play a part in this, right? And my partner and I together, we did this, and then we would just take what we did and say, okay, what went well, what didn't, and let's go get the next one, right? And it became a little bit of an addiction, right? Because it's such a good feeling of winning like that. But I think for me that was
Yes.
the thing, like just learning that it didn't have to be what I always envisioned, was just me figuring out how to produce business on my own. That scared me because it was just not who I was. And when I learned that no, I don't have to do it that way. It can be a team effort, and found ways to be successful with that. Then I really enjoyed that, and I think it also then helped me work with lots of different people versus just one, or just myself.
Yes. Well, and so I love this topic, because the initial thought that popped in my head, because I hear this all the time, is like, okay, we're going to partner up and go do this. And the initial thought popped in my head was, but how are we going to split commissions? And it's such a, because it's so competitive, but there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
I hear that so much of like, well, I don't want to do this because then you take a certain
Yeah.
chunk and it's going to take me longer to achieve my goal, things like that. How did you deal with that in that sales role? And maybe how you're probably dealing with, I know you're dealing with it now even, right? Of how do you overcome like that objection internally to say, listen, like we need the sale, we need to help this client. So how do we do it? How do you overcome that?
Right. It's there. And here's what I would say about that, right? In my mind, it was, I'd rather have 50% of something than 50% of nothing. And also going back to what I said was I was working with people who complemented my weaknesses and I felt like I complemented theirs. So we would really create I don't want to call it a contract because it really wasn't a written contract, but it was almost like an understanding between us about I'll take this part, you take that part, right? And we also had to be willing to trust each other to do our part, but the expectations had to be set, right? Kind of going back to that, we set the expectations, then we do our parts, and then we come together like when we're struggling. And why am I struggling? And they would help me, or why are they struggling? I would help them. But it was almost always 50-50. If it wasn't 50-50, it would have been because me or the other person said, hey, I want to do this, but maybe not 50-50, right? This is what I need you for. Or same with me. I'd be like, I don't really need you 50-50, but I need something here. Can we work this out, right? So, I just had to know what I brought to the table and what the value of that was worth, right? One of my mentors in my current company always says, you get paid for what you do, right? And think about that. Like, what am I doing? What am I contributing here? And what's that worth? And I have to be willing to be honest about the other side of that too. If that other person's contributing more or I'm no longer bringing value, then I need to be willing to say that and say, hey, let me get off this account, right? Because you're running with it. And let me go write 2 more because I'm going to free up, some time here. But it just takes a mature aspect of coming around and being responsible for what you commit to and being, I guess, in a partnership where you can trust each other to have conversations if somebody's not meeting those expectations.
Did you ever have a conversation that when you were talking about like, okay, we need to reset, that went sideways in that sales world?
Yes, I'm sure. I'm thinking through like sideways. There were tense conversations. And it could have gone in the moment, right? It's like not being received well because people's egos get a little crushed, right? When you say, hey, this isn't going well. And you kind of go back to like, well, you just smacked them. You got to give them time to process that. So yeah, I had those more often than not. If I was going at it with something that I wanted to take away, I would tend to try to find something else to give, right? Because this isn't working, but this is, right? Because salespeople are thinking about money, right? Money matters, ego matters, and you want to show up with that. But if there were times where it just wasn't working, those were tough conversations. And in truth, those are probably people that we just didn't work together anymore after that, right? Because we just couldn't agree on it. And I think that's what you have to be willing to say. Not everybody's meant to work together, right? The DNA does not meet and mix well sometimes. And say that, right? If it's just not a good mix, then just don't force it. I think that's okay to do, right? Just that's better than trying to force something that probably isn't going to go well.
Yeah, well, and I love that perspective too, because you have to say it. It's to your point. It's, can we work? Do we want to work together? Can we work together? If we choose to move forward with this, are we in agreement of like what this relationship is going to look like?
Right.
And are we willing to say what needs to be said during the process and have that honest discussion of like, I'm in, I'm out, I'm going to shift, I'm not, I'm going to adjust, I'm not. Like and be willing to step away too, right? If it's not. I get I have revenue because we agreed to 50-50, but I'm not doing anything. So I'm out. Like, it's yours. You need help, let me know. Like, step in later, but I'm out.
Exactly. I also would say I would try to look at the relationship in total too, because sometimes there might be that one isolated thing that you just can't get past. So I, would tend to step back and say, all right, but let's look at the whole relationship here, right? Because the last thing you want to do is go to them and say, you're really annoying me here, not doing your part. And they're going to say, well, you're really annoying me over here. You're not doing your part. So, I try to look at that and say in this partnership, right, what's going well, what's not, right, in total. And then really kind of sit down at that angle too, because sometimes the one-off things might start to feel nitpicking. What's that?
Yeah.
What's that saying about the battle versus the war? You just want to think about that, right? And how you're approaching that, especially if it's somebody you want to continue to partner with, and maybe they don't even realize it, right? They don't even realize they're not meeting your expectations on that particular item.
That's a good point. Well, I think for everyone listening, this is so critical. It's set expectations up front. Who's doing what it looks like. It's almost like paint the picture or create the movie, right, of how we're going to interact with this. And then if the picture is off or the movie starts taking you go to act 2 and of the play and you're like, whoa, like I didn't see this one coming, like plot twist or something.
Yeah.
They'd be willing to sit down and have the conversation and rework the agreement. I think I see a lot of people stick so firm to, no, this is what we agreed to up front, or we didn't have the conversation up front, so I don't know, but I still want my piece of the commission. And then you're in this infinite.
That's a hard one to fight, right? That's a hard one to get behind, because if you didn't set expectations, right, what are you can't fight over just things that you dreamed up in your head.
Yes.
Another thing I would say about that too is don't wait for something to go wrong. I think if you have a partnership with somebody where you're working a business together or pieces of business together, make it a proactive approach to sit down once a month, once a quarter, whatever it is, right? And just say, hey, let's just kind of look at everything in total. How's it going here? What could I be doing different? What would you like to see different? And I've got some things I would like to see different from you. I think trying to do that in a more proactive way versus the reactive way can maybe help prevent some of those blow-ups that people tend to experience.
So true. Well, and I'll be aware of our time because I know we'll make sure you end, and I know you got a bunch of meetings coming up. A couple, maybe 2 last questions. One, let's talk about, coming up as a female in the a male-dominated industry, and I'm seeing it shift a little bit, and it's not where it needs to be. I think, oftentimes we talk about like female versus male or that sort of stuff, and I experienced it differently, where it was like an accounting guy trying to get into operations and trying to get into sales, and so it was like this different, like, what's this accounting dude wanting to, like, he has no idea what he's doing over here, right? And so it's, we see kind of these patterns in different ways and experience them in different ways. But talk to me about, when you're in that sales role, and it really transitioned to what you're doing now as the, first only female CEO within MMA. But as a female, how did you kind of work through some of those barriers? And, what challenges are you seeing even to this day that you have to continue to kind of battle through and make sure you're showing up your best?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been in this role for 9 years. And when the opportunity came for me to step up into the CEO role, I was terrified. Again, going back to my journey, right? But I was not at that time, in my head, I wasn't thinking CEO role. I was leading one of the businesses. But this would be a much bigger role to lead the entire region and all of the businesses, right? So, and the other businesses I just didn't know as much about. So I was terrified on that side. And then a lot of my peers, the CEOs at that time, had been in the business longer than me. They were male. They were all friends. They knew each other. So it's just this insecurity of, are they going to give me credit? Are they going to respect me? Or, are they going to pat me on the head? I mean, what is it? And so what I learned to do was just first of all, I had to build my confidence to walk into that room and know that my voice mattered just as much as theirs. And I needed to be willing to use it. So I would make a point to try to connect with them on topics that I knew we probably shared some interest in, whether personally, professionally, whatever. And then in the meetings over time, I just found that I just had to be willing to bring myself to the meeting and to use my voice. And they were listening, right? They were listening and they were welcoming. So a lot of it was my own head trash.
Yes.
Just not feeling super secure, just for all those reasons I just described and others. But over time, I just realized that most of the time when I had something to say, I'm not the kind of person to talk just to talk. You know, we all have those in meetings where you're like, okay, they talk to talk, but I don't have to say something. If I say something, I'm the introvert, which I said earlier, it's because I feel strongly about it. Or even better, like I tend to think it's fact, right? It's something that I've studied and got some data points on. So I needed to be willing to share that. And what I found was they would be so appreciative of that. And they would be, like, wow, that's a good point. And, just made me feel the same as them. So once you get out of your head, like that there's this bias, there's not an intentional bias walking in the room.
Right.
There could be unintentional bias, right? Because people just don't know and we've been raised different ways and a lot of things that it's unconscious, right? Unconscious bias. So once you realize that and also be willing to call it out, right? So there were plenty of times where I said, oh, you guys are just all going to go golf. Well, I don't really golf. So what else can we do? Right. And just find ways to put it out there for them to go, oh yeah, well, we'd like to include you. So let's do something different. Right. Over time, that got more and more comfortable. And I just stopped worrying about it because I was there to be a leader, to really lead for my team, represent my team.
Yes.
And I just started thinking of it that way, right? When I'm here, my job is to do what it takes to help my team back in the region and my team sitting around this table. And I wanted to do my part for that. And thankfully, MMA has been very supportive of that.
Yes.
And I've just always felt like if I need help or I need resources, I just have to ask, get it out of my head that I have any sort of weakness or barrier to that. It's on me to ask and use my voice. And when I do, I tend to feel supported by them.
It's so cool. I tell people all the time, my biggest shift in my business, my guess is like 6 years ago, is when I finally figured out it has nothing to do with me. It's all about them. And you're saying the exact same thing of like, it's if I'm here for my team, for the broader organization, for your family, whatever, good things happen. You say the right thing. Right. You have the right intention in your actions and words. But isn't it an amazing shift though? It's a small shift. It's seemingly small of like, oh no, it's about my team. And that's who I'm showing up for. Instead of just I'm showing up for myself. It's a small but significant shift for confidence.
It feels like you just opened up the treasure chest when it happens, right? Because you're like, oh, this feels so much better, right? It's just all the anxiety kind of subsides, and it's like, okay, this is good. I can do this. I know this. I know how to do this.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, it is. It's really, really liberating, to say the least.
So true. So true. No, I love this. Okay. Oh, I have so many questions for you, Shannon. We'll have to do a part 2 or something like that.
Okay.
There's so much. I think, one question around sales leadership specifically, like dealing with sales people.
Yeah.
In order to get the most out of them, what's like one piece of advice you'd give sales leaders that are listening to be like, okay, this is how I've gotten the most out of sales people and kind of help manage them best?
Cool. If we can all figure that out.
We could spend days on this one for sure.
We could. I mean, because I was a salesperson, right? I do think in terms of that, right? I think about what resonated for me and what did I want from my leader. Being a servant leader try to show up with those salespeople and say, all right, well, first of all, when we set a goal, I don't set their goal. We set the goal. They set a goal. We talk through it. We set it together because I want them to feel it's their goal, not my goal, right? My job is to challenge them to stretch and to grow and all of those things. Then they set the goal. And then it's a conversation about, okay, so what do you need from me now to achieve that goal? And so we do a lot around that. And then throughout the year, it's checking in, like, where are you? What's not going well, right? And what can I help with? What do you need? So I'm that servant leader showing up because my job is to work for them, right? And really help them feel the support. And if there are barriers that I can remove or resources that, they haven't been able to get within my power, then I'm their champion, right? But it has to be an honest conversation, right? It has to go both ways. And if we're having a conversation and that salesperson is, I know, struggling, and I really try to get to the root of that, right? Because going back to not just because I'm your leader, but because I care about you as a person, right? No one wants to go home and feel like they failed or they're not winning, right? Especially a salesperson, they want to feel like they're winning, right?
Yes.
So why aren't you feeling like you're winning? And what's the root here? And what part can you own? And what part can I own to help you get there? And it's just a different dynamic than, hey, Joe, your numbers look awful. And, are you like camping out at the beach every day or what? That's going to trigger somebody, right? What do you mean? No, I'm out there. I'm trying, So it's just the makeup of the conversation, again, coming from a place of empathy and caring and servant leadership. I get the most back from people in those conversations than anything else that I've ever experienced, from another leader in my career. So I choose to go about it that way. Now, there are times we have a tough conversation, right? It's not working. It's not working. But for me, it's more because that person really isn't committed. And if we can get to the bottom of that, and this just isn't for them, then okay, well, then let me help you find a way to get I don't want to say a soft landing or an exit or whatever it is, right? And keep your dignity and go find and do what you love, right? If this isn't what you love, but you have to be willing to have that yes. Very thoughtful, meaningful conversation.
Yes. Well, I think I hope everybody's picking this up too, because in the past 30 seconds, you probably asked 5 to 6 questions. And those are the questions you're asking the people. And I think one strength of you and strength of just really powerful leaders is the ability to ask questions in an authentic way, but you're seeking the deeper meaning, and you're seeking the answers and helping them think differently, and use so many questions, even what's working well, what's not working well. Where are we getting stuck? Why are we think we're getting stuck here? You crushed this one. What was different about that one? It's the questions we ask that I hear you saying. I'm just repeating back. They're so powerful. And I think it's such a skill set that leaders need for salespeople and anyone. Ask more questions because you'll get to the right answer.
100%. And the more you do it and you see the reaction, right, you'll learn how to tailor that and work with different individuals at different stages to be successful.
I think that's huge. I love it. Okay, Shannon, I know we're at time. So one last thing, and then I'll let you roll onto the next one. If individuals want to connect with Marsh McLennan and the Florida region specifically, how do they best do that? And then I'll wrap us up.
Yeah. So first of all, I invite anybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm out there. You can find me directly. And when you think about connecting with us as an agency, we have our website, which is marshmma.com, and reach out to me. I'm glad to help, glad to direct things, get you to the right people. Again, going back to my servant style, right? Just tell me what you need and I'll help you get to that right person to help you out.
I love that. Love that. Well, Shannon, thank you so much for your time. Just absolute pleasure. And I probably will be reaching out at some point about a part 2 because this was fun. And I have a list of questions down here that I didn't ask yet. So.
Okay, good. We'll do it. Well, thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We'll talk soon. Thanks. Thank you for joining us today on the Matt Phillips Podcast. If you are like us, we know that you are here to do great things, to become the sales leader that makes things happen and drives big time sales results. We know you have that big vision, and we are here to help get you where you want to go. We're here to help you develop that unstoppable, rock solid leadership skill set and help you train to master the one true differentiator, mental toughness. We would love to be part of your journey. So if you are ready, head over to mattphillipscoaching.com and check out the ways that we can help. As always, please share this episode and make sure you subscribe by clicking the button below. Thank you again. And now, go crush the day.